Hey guys, welcome to Coding After 30. In this video, we're going to do our follow-up for our first React intro course that we that sounds terrible. Our first introductory course, I guess. If you missed it, I'll put a link here. Watch that video first because it gives you a brief introduction to React, how to get started, and introduces JSX, something that you have to know because that is what we're going to be using from this point on. But in this video, we're just going to talk about functional components and what they are. And basically what a functional component is a JavaScript function that renders something to the screen. That's basically the basic way of looking at it. And today we're going to look at two ways to write them: as a general function using the function keyword, or writing them as arrow functions. So before we jump into the code, I'm just going to do a quick explainer video of what they are first, and then we'll get into our code pen and create a very basic layout using functional components in React, as well as learn about props. So stay tuned, get ready, and let's do this. Alright guys, so let's take a look at how to create functions in JavaScript. Now, if you've been doing JavaScript for a little bit, you should be familiar with functions. If you're new and you need a refresher, that's what we're going to do here now. So the first function we're going to do is use the function keyword. By the way, I'm using something called run.js. It's available for Mac or Windows. You could download it, and it's a great way to test out your JavaScript without setting up a specific environment. And what I like about this, it kind of keeps you out of the browser, so you could just focus just on pure JavaScript. So let's start by declaring a function with a function keyword. And we are going to create an add function which takes two arguments and adds them together. Now, I could have called this function whatever, but since we're adding, it's appropriate to call it add. So our function will take two arguments, number 1 and number 2. Now we're going to access these numbers inside a function and perform the add operation. Now, when you're performing any operation in a function, you are going to get a result. So we need some place to store the result. So we're going to put it inside a variable, kind of like a shoebox in which you could store things. Now, even though we have the result here, this function is not useful for us because it doesn't return anything. So we're going to return our result so we could utilize it. Beautiful, our function is complete. Now we could just console log the result of our function. We do that by calling our function and passing two numbers into it. So let's do 5 plus 5. And our answer is 10. You can also save the result to a variable. And we could just console log our myResult variable. I mean, really simple stuff. And basically, this is what we're going to do in React. Instead of returning the result in terms of a math operation, we will be returning JSX. The most important part is that you understand the basic structure of a function, where we create a function, we pass our arguments, and then we return some result. So now we could take this function and we could rewrite it as an arrow function. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to comment this out. An arrow function is a function expression, so we're going to start it by typing const, the name of the function. And the way you know that this is an arrow function, because when you do the equal sign and greater sign, it looks like an arrow. We will do the same thing, pass two arguments that we want to add. Now, in the previous example, we created a constant, a variable, to store our result. We could actually just return our result. And here we are, and we are done. And notice that we call our function the same way and we get the same result, 10. So if I were to make this 15 plus 5, we get 20. If I make 15 plus 25, we get 40. Now, the beauty of arrow functions is that you could simplify them even farther. You could actually, if you have one single return, you could omit the return altogether. and it's going to be an implicit return just like that. So now we have the same function as we have above, except it is much cleaner and it still works. So if I do 25 plus 25, we get 50. So let's review. To write a function with a function keyword, we start with function, name of the function, whatever arguments that we want to pass, whatever logic we would like to perform, and then return the result. It's going to be very similar in React. We're going to write a function that has some sort of logic, and then it returns JSX, which generates our view. Let's review the arrow function. It starts by writing const, the name of the function. This could also be let. Then you pass your same arguments, whatever logic you have, and then you return the result of that logic from your function. And as you could see with the arrow functions, we could write them a lot shorter and cleaner. So if this still doesn't make sense, don't worry about it. When we jump into React, you guys are gonna see how easy it is. And the most important part to remember about both of these examples, we have a function that takes some sort of arguments, performs some sort of action, and returns a result. And it's going to be the same in React. We're going to have a function that's going to take some arguments, perform some sort of function, and it's going to return JSX, which is going to generate the view. So let's take a look in our CodePen to see how this works. Hey guys, so the best way to get started is to go to reactjs.org and then click Get Started button, try React, and open in CodePen. Once you guys are here, I'd like to change the screen view to this layout. And what we're going to do, we're going to just open these tabs evenly. What I want you guys to do is just delete the hello world, and we are ready to get started. Now the first thing I'm going to do is paste some CSS and go over what we're doing here, just so when we add our components we have a visual representation. So we're going to do box sizing border box, which will make doing our padding and margin math very easy. Just something that it's always nice to do. And we're going to have our main app component that's gonna be the parent to all of our other components, and it's going to be set to height of the screen. And we're using display grid to create 3 rows. We're using grid template row. We're going to have our header, which is going to be 55 pixel. Our main area is going to be 1 FR, which is 1 fractional unit, basically take the remaining space, and our footer is going to be 45 pixels. We're going to have a gap between our rows. We're going to create 3 components. We're going to have a header component, main component, and the footer component. So why don't you guys go ahead and copy this CSS so you have it, and then we'll jump into writing our first component. Alright guys, just quick review. We are using our React render to be able to target this ID and be able to write our React code, our JavaScript code that's going to be injected into this div. So we have 2 arguments that this takes. It takes what you want to inject and into where, and which is going to be into our root. So as in the previous example, we had an H1, and that's what was being injected into our root div. Now from our previous video, we discussed that this is not HTML, but this is JSX. And if you're not sure what I am talking about right now, please go check out the previous video. So with that being said, we're going to start writing our first component, and we're going to start with our functional components. It's always a good habit to write your functions first before you call them. So we're going to use our function keyword for our first component, and we're going to create our parent component app. So type function, and as you could see, it's just a regular functions, just the way we did in the previous example. Now we want to return our JSX, and what we're going to return is a div that is going to be our parent component for all of our other components. And for now, I'm just going to put parent so we could have a visual representation. So right now we don't see it showing because we're not telling our React DOM to render our component. So the way we do that is we use our JSX notation, add our app component. And all JSX components have to have the closing tag here. So as you could see, we are now rendering our parent. So now whenever using functional components and within the JSX, if you wanted to add a class and we want to add class app, this is not going to work because you have to remember that this is not HTML. This is actually JavaScript. And so the word class, it is a JavaScript unique word, and so you can't use it. So to make things work, instead of writing class, you write class name. And that's not a big problem. Now with that done, we have a div with a class name app, which refers to our CSS here. So now when we add all the other components, we're going to start to see the layout. And to show you that we are connected, I'm just going to give this a background of pink. There, beautiful. We have our nice parent component all set, and let's move on to our next three components, which is going to be the header, main, and footer. So here's the CSS for our three components. The only thing we're doing is adding colors so we could have a visual representation of what they are. So let's use the power of copy and paste just so you guys don't see me retyping everything. So our next component is going to be header. Make sure you use a capital H. And it's not going to be a div. It's going to be, I mean, it can be a div, but we're going to call it header. And again, the only reason we're using class names here is because I wanted to tell you about using class name in JSX. We could have just easily targeted as the actual header component like this and not use the class. Okay, so this is going to be the header. So let's create our next component, which is going to be main. And we're going to use our main HTML tag for our main area. And we're going to create our last one, which is going to be our footer component. And we're going to give it class name footer, or class of footer. And we're going to call this footer. Alright guys, so we have our three components. We have our header component, we have our main component, and we have our footer component. As you could see, it's basically JavaScript functions that return some JSX. Alright, once our header, main, and footer components are created, we're going to pass these components into our app component. So we're going to go here to our app component, and we're going to pass in header, main, and footer. And just like magic, we have our header, parent, and footer component. And because of our super awesome CSS, we have this visual representation to see. So that was super easy. And now you guys know how to render elements via JSX to the DOM using React. So the next step here is we're going to take these same elements and we're going to convert them into arrow functions. And one thing I want to mention to you guys, so remember I said how you always want to declare your functions before you call them. So because these are functions declared with the function keyword, they actually get hoisted to the top. So with these functions, I could actually use them before I declare them and it's still gonna work. But we're going to see with arrow functions, that's not the case. So it's a good practice. It's always good to make sure that you guys call your functions after the fact. And as you guys get working with React in the React development environment, which we're going to set up eventually, right now there's no point, we're still learning React. All these different components are going to be imported from separate files. But for now, we're going to keep everything here in this JavaScript file. So let's get started here, and we're going to convert our app component into the arrow function. And I'm going to close the CSS. We actually don't need to see it. And now let's convert our app component to be an arrow functional component. So we start with const app, put an equal sign, after the brackets put equal with a greater than sign, and that was it. So notice how we now have our beautiful arrow function. And as we mentioned before, if you're only returning one single thing and there's not that much logic, you could actually do an implicit return where you could delete the return and just return the div. And so this makes it look a lot cleaner. So I'm just I don't know, messing around right here. Here you are, we have our first arrow function, and let's do the same thing to all the other ones. So we're going to go here, same as before, const header equals, and there you go. And I'm just going to keep everything the same here for now, just so you could know that you would write a return. If you were to have some sort of logic here, whatever, you would definitely want to keep the return statement. Let's convert our main to an arrow function, const main equals, okay. And now let's do the same thing to our footer, const footer equals arrow function. Okay, here we go. So we convert everything to our arrow functions. Later videos I will talk about more specifically the difference between our arrow functions versus our regular functions declared with a function keyword. But just like I said before, the only thing with arrow functions, they do not get hoisted up. So if I put them beneath our React render that calls them, they're not going to work, because if you're going to get this error that says we can't get app before initialization, and if the app function was written as a functional keyword, it would get hoisted up, and that would work just as I showed before. So as always, a good habit is to make sure that you declare your functions first before you call them, regardless if they're regular functional components or if you're using arrow function. Like in the previous example where we talked about how we could pass arguments into our function, we're going to talk about this idea of props and what it is and how it works in React. So let's do it. So before we continue with props, I just want to thank you guys for watching this video and letting me practice teaching. It's something that I want to get into, and hopefully some of the stuff I'm showing you is helping you guys. So with that being said, let's continue here. So just like we mentioned, props are basically arguments that you're passing to a function. So what we're going to do, instead of having displacement text here, we're going to create an h1, and we're going to give it an argument of title. And of course, we're going to close our h1 tag. Now we're putting everything in these brackets because anything within these brackets is JavaScript. So if I didn't have the brackets here, our React code would just return the title. But I don't want the title. I want to pass a variable, or my props. So we're going to put it inside the brackets. So now we have our h1 that expecting to get a title prop. So what I'm going to do, put props, because when you're working with React, you're actually getting an object called props which has title in it. So we're going to pass props, and we're going to access the props with the idea of title. So now what we want to do is we actually want to pass props to the header. So we're going to go to our app where we have our header component, and we're going to pass title, which is the name of our prop, and we're going to pass let's learn React. And here you are, we are passing a prop called title to our header element. If you don't want to keep writing props.title and pass props here, we could actually destructure the props object by putting it in the brackets and just getting what we want, which is just the title, and then we could avoid the props and just have the title. So now that would work as well. So let's practice passing other props into our main, and this is going to be a p tag. It could be anything you want, and we're going to put, let's say, message, and we're going to use our destructuring. And now let's go to our main and pass our message prop. I'm just gonna say thank you for watching. And here you are, we have our message being passed via prop, and we see display on our DOM here. And then finally, let's pass a prop to our footer. And so let's go to our footer, and we're going to call it message again. And here we're going to put it inside span. Why not? It doesn't really matter. And let's go to our footer, and we're gonna pass prop message, and we're gonna call it, let's see, well, I just want to say thanks guys for watching this video. I hope you guys learned a lot, and if you enjoy this content or would like to support the channel, consider subscribing. subscribing. So with that being said, we introduced the concept of functional components. We used the function keyword to declare our functions. We also wrote them as arrow functions, and we introduced the idea of props. By the way, guys, I will leave a link to this code pen, so if you guys would like to take a look at this code, you guys can do so. Again, I just want to say thank you for watching. It really means a lot to me. I'm still learning on how to teach, and I figured with practicing making these videos on YouTube will help me get better, and hopefully will help you to learn more about React and JavaScript. So if you like this video and would like to support this channel, consider subscribing. It really helps me to stay motivated making these videos because they do take a long time. So once again, thanks for watching. I'm Paul from Coding After 30, and I'll see you guys next time.